And welcome back to TL Talks Podcast. I am TL. It's good to have you. Like and subscribe. Thanks in advance. First segment is called Thought of the Day, and it is about what you owe people. Um, Spoiler alert, the answer is nothing. You literally don't owe anybody anything, and nobody owes you anything. So, what I mean by that is outside of like you taking care of your child if you're a parent, taking care of your pet like me, I'm a dog owner. um, some of the basics, right? uh, Being a good a spouse, if you're married, those basics you do owe something to your spouse, to your kids, to your pets, to take good care of them. But outside of that, guess what? You don't owe anybody anything, and nobody owes you anything. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because um, I think it's a very good use of the thought of the day, because I think the sooner that you can realize that nothing is owed to you and you don't owe anybody anything, what that does is it's a blessing in disguise, because you're able to not be burdened by thinking that you're obligated to do something for somebody else. But then also, if you don't expect anything from anybody else, you can't be let down. So So, a little tidbit of wisdom I'd like to pass on to you. That's my thought of the day. Next segment's called If I Were President. That one has to do with standards for president. So, I'm not going to call any names uh, for this segment, but I think that there should be standards for the U.S. president. I think that whether that's a mental acuity test, a polygraph test, um, I would love to see something in place that would basically prove that person running for president is mentally all there. They're a good person. They aren't shady, aren't lying about things. And so I know that people like that exist. Like I know presidential candidates that would fit that criteria. The current president, maybe not, but that's who's in office. So I just think that there's a problem with there not being any uh, standards around who the person is. Like, what is the qualifications? That you have a pulse, that you are in a certain political party, that you have money to campaign. I mean, like, what are we really talking about here? So if you're the leader of the free world, United States of America, that big of a title, there's not much titles bigger than that. How is there not standards around that? Right? Like, you don't need to prove that you have mental acuity, that you're not mentally declining. You don't need to prove that you have integrity. You don't need to prove that you're not lying. Like, these are just real simple things you can implement to kind of like raise the standard so that we feel like we're in good hands. So that's what I would put in place. If I were president, I would put in place a few different standards for people running for president. Because right now there isn't many. And it's just the things I just talked about seem like they're enough to get somebody elected, and that's a problem in my opinion. The next segment is called TLRantz. This one is about people doing their jobs or lack thereof. Oh, I try not to get too worked up about this. So I had a bad experience with my first house that I bought with solar panels. It was all a mess. I was Things weren't explained to me correctly. Then I didn't know that I had to like basically get a tax credit and then put that tax credit to the loan to get my payment to stay the same. But since I didn't know that, the payment went up from like 115 to 195, which I wouldn't have done it if it was 195. So it's in the small writing. You live and you learn. Well, the solar companies are smart because what they do is they have attractive females do these sales pitches And so, as much as I would like to think that I cannot be swayed by a attractive female, um, I think it plays a part. So the solar company that I just signed a contract with for my new house, they're called Ion Solar, and they had an attractive female come to my house, and she went over and it all sounded great. But I already had a bad experience with solar, so I wasn't really bought in. And then she like sweetened the deal by saying, "Well, what if we made your payment lower?" So she knocked off like, whatever, $10 per month. And I was like, "Well, that is pretty affordable." So I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll do it." Well, that all sounds good on paper, right? Now let me catch you up to what's actually happened. That was sometime at the end of last year. They said your system should be up by January, so you won't get charged until January. And at that point, it'll offset your electric bill and it's all good. Well, right now it is March 20th, 2023. Um, my solar panels are not running. They're on my house. It's a whole long, tedious, convoluted process. So they say that the city has to come out and check certain things that they're up to code for them to approve it. Then at that point, you can start using them and, it'll all offset. It takes care of it. Well, they came out a month ago. It was not approved. They didn't hook it up correctly. They said, we're going to get out there. We'll fix it. We'll reschedule it. It'll get approved. We'll be good. Well, today's Monday. Is today Monday? Yeah, today's Monday. End of last week, I get a notification in my email because I knew that they were meeting there on Thursday, and it says the inspection was not approved again. So here's the kicker. Starting in January, I started getting billed for solar panels that I'm not using, while getting billed for my electric from Excel. So I'm getting double billed. I called Ion. They said they'd have somebody call me. They haven't called me. Um, I'm not sure what I can do contractually, but the point of why I'm bringing this up on my podcast is it pisses me off to no end. There are so many people that don't know how to do their jobs correctly, and nobody cares. Nobody's holding them accountable. Like, or at least that's how it seems. But that's crazy to me. Like the fact that I don't know if it's like a COVID thing or a 2023 thing or what's going on, but like the amount of people that don't do their jobs correctly that I have to deal with, like makes me not want to deal with anybody. And so maybe that's because I'm getting older. Maybe I just have less patience for people. I don't know what's going on, but it's a problem. And so my TLRantz is about people not doing their jobs. Happens a lot. I have less and less patience for it, especially in this situation where I made a huge decision to get solar panels and commit to this payment. Now I'm getting double billed. The whole thing's a shit show. But then when I try to get answers or I try to escalate it to a manager, they don't get back to me. So that what that tells me is that I made the wrong decision again for getting solar panels, and I don't know if I can like get out of it. I probably can't. But the fact that like it's almost like you go through a bad situation and you're like, okay, I'm never doing that again. And then you have an attractive female in front of you giving you this wonderful presentation, and all of it sounds great, right? If it goes the way she's saying, it's a great deal. It's a good deal. You should do it. You have no way of knowing that what she's presenting to you isn't gonna be how it goes. So because she's good at her job and she's good at selling things, good for her. I took the bait. But then there was no way for me to know that everything after her was going to be a shit show. That's what I didn't sign up for. Doing with her right now, trying not to like lose my cool, but it's so frustrating. So that's my TLRantz segment for this month. Moving on to football talk. Before we get into the interview, football talk is for three teams now. It used to be the Browns and the Bandits. Now we're adding the Vipers to that because I'm coaching a semi-pro men's team here in Colorado now called the Vipers, and so I want to keep you in the loop for that. So first of all, Browns, of course, Browns are first. Browns have made a few moves in the offseason so far, signed some free agents. Um, they got a good D tackle from Minnesota. They got another solid D tackle. They got Thornhill from the Chiefs, who's a safety, who replaces John Johnson III. And so they got some pieces. They re-signed our backup center, played very well last year because our starting center got hurt for the year. And so once again, it's a luxury to have a good GM. And I'm like a pig in mud as far as how happy I am with having a GM that's as competent as Andrew Berry is. And so, no complaints. I'm happy. I still think there's some things we can address, but I really, really trust Andrew Berry. I trust him more than any GM that I've ever dealt with. Just as far as how intelligent he is, how ahead of the curve he is. Um, he's really smart. He's just a really, really, really smart dude that makes really, really calculated, smart decisions. And I couldn't be happier. So one thing I want to add before we move on to the Bandits is the Giants recently signed Daniel Jones to a big contract. And just to give you an idea of how smart Andrew Berry is, Daniel Jones I think is making 6 million less than Deshaun Watson this upcoming season. So everybody was like, "That's a crazy contract you gave to Deshaun Watson, right?" Which it is. It's a lot of money, but it's only 6 million different from Daniel Jones. So if you look objectively at it, Daniel Jones, or sorry, Deshaun Watson, his potential, I mean, the dude could be a top three quarterback again. He has so much potential and he's still young. He's like 26, that it's a no brainer for you to do that as long as you think he can stay out of trouble. And so he had the foresight, right, of signing him long term, giving him a whole bunch of money, even guaranteed money, which is brilliant because you're locking up your quarterback, your franchise quarterback for the future. But then also you're resetting the quarterback market. So now teams like the Ravens, like the Giants, et cetera, they have to deal with players seeing what Deshaun Watson got and saying, why not me? Right. So Lamar Jackson might not be on the Ravens long term because of our contract with Deshaun Watson. So that's so smart to me. It's so smart to lock up your quarterback, give him a lot of money, knowing that that's going to be the norm soon. So you did it before everybody else did it, and now everybody's basing their future contracts off of what you just did. Like he literally reset the quarterback market just by doing that, and that Daniel Jones contract proves it was brilliant. So that's the update with the Browns. There's still some stuff I want them to address a couple more positions, but I've been happy with what they've done so far. Obviously, our run defense wasn't good last year, so we got a big active D tackle to plug the middle, and another solid D tackle, and a DN from the Texans who's pretty good. I think he was top five in pressure rate last year, which is kind of crazy because that means him and Miles are both top five. Um, so yeah, I've liked the move so far. A couple more positions I think we can address, but there's the draft, so there's other opportunities to do more. So far so good with the Browns. Moving on to the Bandits. If you know me, you know that I coach a women's tackle football team called the Denver Bandits, and our season is quickly approaching. So right now it's March 20th, and our first game is April 1st in Houston, Texas. So that's very soon. It's less than 2 weeks. So this season is about to go down. This this year's Denver Bandits team is awesome. Um, we have a unique team in that we have a mixture of you know rookies, returners, out of state players, international players. And so the makeup of our team is interesting because you have this, hodgepodge, mixed hodgepodge of players, and it's good and bad, right? It's good because you have good numbers and a lot of talent, but it's not ideal because some of those players, because they're out of state, that means they can only come to practice like once a month, right? So you have people that live in town that are there all the time, including the international players that are there all the time. And then you have these out of state players that are there once a month. So I think the Denver Bandits do a great job of making making it work, even though that's not ideal. So they've developed a system where they're able to help, they're able to hold players accountable to how much know the playbook, how much they're working out, how much they're practicing. Because if you're not with a team, you need to somehow show that you're doing your part and not just on a couch and then showing up one weekend a month. So they have it down to a science. I mean, I'm really impressed. I'm not sure if I could do it better myself. Um, so now I'm not saying that all the Denver Bandits do what they're supposed to do, but what I'm saying is that there's a system implemented for them to easily prove and do what they need to do. So they're not behind and they have a chance to play or start because they've done everything they've been asked to do. And so shout out to them. I'm excited for this season. This season is going to be crazy because the WNFC, our league, started a new three division format, which I don't agree with that, but it's who cares what I think. So now there's a central division, which we're in. We're in there with Texas, which is the best team, never loses. Kansas City, Mississippi, and who am I forgetting? Um, oh, Houston. Duh. Houston's the new team. Sorry. So those are the teams in our division. Those are all really good, like pretty good teams. So you have Kansas City, who's a former playoff team. Texas has won every championship. Uh, Mississippi's always a good team. They're either in the playoffs or barely missing the playoffs. Houston is our first opponent. Um, we're playing in Houston on April 1st. They are intriguing because they've been able to recruit some really serious talent. Um, so it's been really impressive to see who they've gotten in year one. But putting it together, it remains to be seen, right? So you recruit some freak athletes, Team USA players, D Scott, etc. But how does that look, right? Like how are you able to put it together? How well are they coached? Um, you know, do you have any holes? How many holes do you have as far as weaknesses on your team? That's all going to be very obvious once you start playing. And so we're gonna, unfortunately, I'm going to be actually driving one of the vans, 16 hours to Houston, Texas. So we're going to leave first thing in the morning that Friday and then arrive like around noon on game day. But our game isn't until 7 p.m., which is ideal. Gives us time to check into the hotel and chill out before we, go there for pregame. So we have a good schedule as far as traveling. Um, but this season we have 6 games. All of them are tough. The only team that seemed like they could be not tough was Seattle because last year they weren't tough. Um, but as you'll see in this interview coming up shortly with Scott McCarron, Seattle is back, baby. So Seattle Majestics have reloaded. They have about 30 rookies who are quality rookies. They have some really key veterans that came back to play for the team this year, and so their numbers are good. Like last year, their numbers were pretty low. This year, their numbers are in the 50s, just like us. And so it's we can't rely on a war of attrition and just wearing them down that way. We have to outcoach them and outplay them. And so um, literally the whole schedule is hard. So Houston's a headache because they're a first year team, hard to plan for them. Seattle's the Seattle of old, so that's going to be a tough game. Secondly, we play Kansas City. They're a playoff team. They have three of our former players, so that'll be interesting. And they've recruited a lot of good athletes in the offseason. Texas is obviously Texas. Um, and then you have Mississippi and Utah. So Mississippi also have recruited some really good athletes. They got Rashawn Gore, who used to play for Texas. I think she's playing quarterback, but I'm not positive. We'll see, I guess. And then they got Nat Nix, who used to play for us. She's in the military, so she got stationed down there. So we're going to play against her, which it'd be great to see her. She's a baller. Then they had the fortunate situation where Alabama Fire dropped out of the league, and Alabama Fire was a good team, a small team, but a good team. And some of their best athletes came over to Mississippi. So, like um, Foe's a DB, Mary Woodard is a receiver in DB. I think Chardonnay is a D lineman, D tackle or D end. So those are really good players that adds on to what Mississippi already had. So that's going to be a crazy game. That's at home, thank God. Texas is at home, which is going to help a little bit, but it's still Texas. And then lastly, we play Utah, last game of the season. So the way our season goes is we have Houston away, bye, then 4 games in a row, which isn't ideal to play Texas at the end of a 4 game stretch. Then another bye, then our last game against Utah, which is going to be in Utah. So Utah is also going to be interesting because they have a new coach for the first time in their history. They're not head coach is not Rick Rasmussen. It's my buddy Jasper, who has been a coach for them in the past, and he kind of had a falling out with Rick, and now he's the head guy. And so, pretty sure they're still going to run triple option, but they're definitely going to run it differently. If I know Jasper, he definitely doesn't want to just copy and paste what Rick did, and so we'll see. I actually plan on having Camry on next month, talk to him about Mississippi, and then Jasper from Utah on the month after that, talk to him about Utah. And so those are the interviews coming up. But this interview is with Scott from Seattle, so let's get into that. Lastly, but not least, the Vipers. Vipers are a semi-pro men's team here in Colorado that I'm coaching now. They're kind of a rebranding of a team last year that I helped out with called the Thrashers. They had a really good season, had a really good regular season record, went to the playoffs, lost in the playoffs, came up short, but they've rebranded. They've recruited some good athletes. They're very well coached. They have, in my opinion, the best coaching staff um, in semi-pro men's football in Colorado. And so, really good coaching staff, a lot of talent. Um, and so, shout out to them. I've been going to the practices on Saturdays. I still Bandits are first priority, but any other time I have, I give the Vipers. And so, Justin, their head coach and owner, uh, said he'd like me to be the assistant OC this year, which I really appreciate. And so I'm just trying to make it work with my schedule. And so I'm going to meet with him in the next week or two to go over the playbook to make sure I'm up to speed. But I've been really, really impressed with the team, how coachable players are, all the talent. They just have a good culture, man. And a lot of teams don't. And so I'm just really impressed with that. So go Vipers, go Bandits, and go Browns. So without further ado, we're going to get into the interview. My interview is with Scott McCarron from the Seattle Majestics. It's an awesome interview. He's a good friend of mine. Hope you guys enjoy. So here we go. All right. I would like to welcome back Scott McCarron from the Seattle Majestics. Scott, it's been a while. It's good to have you back. How you been?
I'm good, man. It's good to be back. Good to talk to you again because it's been a long time since you and I have spoke.
Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
long time, too long.
too long, too long. Yeah, so when the Denver Bandits played Seattle last season, I expected to see you, but I didn't see you, and so that was a bummer. And then this season that we're about to have, our first schedule had us playing who were playing plus Las Vegas. And then when they redid the schedules, they added Seattle instead of Las Vegas,
Yeah,
um, which I guess is fair because we went to Oregon last year. So, pretty much everybody has like one long trip. Um,
yeah.
I guess it is what it is. But Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
I'm
So
excited. I'm
I'm
excited to
excited.
be out there this year.
Yeah, yeah. So you've already confirmed that you will be making the trip, so I will be
I
able to
will
see
be I will be making the trip. Yes.
you. You'll be there this time, and
I
we've
will be
already
there.
organized. We're gonna grab lunch on Sunday, and
Yeah.
should be a good time. So
What's funny about the whole thing is that last year, I mean, like I took a step back the last couple of years on the staff,
yeah,
and so I just decided, last year that there was really no reason for me to go other than just being an extra coach there. But I wasn't head coach, I wasn't a coordinator. There wasn't really no purpose for me being there other than like admin side. And so I just said, hey, look, I'm not going on road trips, and I didn't. And now I'm back.
yeah, yeah. So before we get into football, because it's going to be the majority of the conversation,
Yeah.
um, the last time I had you on the podcast was years ago, and I know I always ask people about their backgrounds and stuff, and I know you have some kids. Um, but what do you do for work again? Because I don't remember exactly what you do.
I do a whole host of stuff. So my
Yeah.
main thing is I run. So we have a private equity group that some friends of mine and I have put together about going into our seventh year now, sixth year, dating
Mhm.
myself. And so I run operations for that group. So we've got some pizza restaurants, some gyms, some multifamily properties in the U.S. We've got some international properties in Panama, Brazil, and yeah, always working on expansion on that front. But that's kind of my day to day. And then I think like my background was with Costco wholesale. I was with them for 20 years. And a good buddy of mine and I started up a consulting business on the warehouse side, club warehouse side, to help companies develop their portfolio and build them into Costco ready products. So that's what I do in my free time when I'm not coaching football.
Interesting. So I was just going to let you answer that question and leave it alone, but now I'm
Yeah,
more curious because I started a new career in real estate
yeah,
2 years ago, and so I've worked in full time in real estate ever since then. Um, I love the career. I mean, I've never been happier as far as what I'm doing for work, and but I've learned a lot. Like obviously, there's a lot to learn. So I kind of feel like that's some like it's not the same, but it's kind of in the same ballpark is kind of
yeah,
what you do. And
yeah.
so now I have some more curious questions. So when you say you're a part of an equity group and you guys have purchased like or you guys own some pizza places and gyms and some places
Mhm.
out of the country, in the country,
Yep.
like I'm not trying to be nosy, but how
All good.
exactly, yeah, yeah. How does that work as far as like how how do the details work themselves out? Is it like you guys put your heads together and figure out what property is going to be most like not beneficial, but most profitable one
Yep.
by one, and then you
Mhm.
take them out and get them under contract and I assume you guys all chip in money, or do you guys
Yep.
have different roles within the team? Like maybe you're the analytics guy, and another guy has most of the money. And I mean, like, how does that go exactly?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of us that are involved in this. Although my main business partner and I handle the majority of it.
Okay.
Uh, but he handles the sort of prospecting, looking at opportunities that come up,
Yeah.
analyzing numbers. And then because I handle the operations side, generally we'll go to a site that we're interested in and taking a look at, walking it, seeing what works, what doesn't work, what the area needs, maybe what it doesn't need. Maybe it's a property that was set up as one specific thing, and that's that it wasn't successful for a reason.
Yeah.
So we talk about stuff like that, and in general, like I said, the two of us are generally will be decision makers in a lot of it. But the international stuff is really a lot of it was exploratory. We have some developmental land down in Brazil that we're working on building a single family vacation homes on. not our own, but multiple lots. Like we're planning on building those. We've got some Airbnb vacation rentals in Panama that were built for us by a builder down there, developer down there. And then we're in the midst of working on a big real estate deal in Panama, where we would acquire boutique resorts and hotels down there. That'll be a pretty large portfolio expansion. So, yeah, I mean, there's other people that are involved in the group that do more minor things, but for the most part, you know, it takes up, it's my 9 to 5. Well, really I don't really have non-work hours. So, you know, just things pop up, you take care of them, you got to do it. But, you know, in all honesty, like the bulk of the business that we do, not financially, but from a time perspective on my end, is generally the restaurants. Those are the most on hands. I would say portfolio, you know, group of portfolio spots that require my time having to deal with. And that could be anywhere from personnel to operational stuff to, you know, needing something fixed to whatever. I mean, it just, there's just a never ending barrage of things.
Yeah. So hiring and firing people and anything in between, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I try to leave the GMs to do a lot of that stuff and run their business. I try to be as hands off as I can be, but you know, every time I've tried to take a step back, I get pulled back in. So
That's what it is. So does that make you wish that because your portfolio is like a mixture of, from what you've told me, it's like pizza places, gyms, properties, in and outside of the US. And then now you're going to be embarking on a huge thing in Panama, which is going to be like a resort slash hotel thing.
Yep.
So those are all different types of, you know,
Yep.
businesses and
Yep.
buildings. So do you ever like kind of wish that you didn't have the pizza place on that portfolio just because it takes up so much of your time? Yeah.
Almost every day I roll out of bed, brother.
Yeah. That's what I assumed, but I mean, I know like it's part of the equation, right? Like there's a reason that you're doing it, but also
Yeah.
there's a give and take, right? Like there's a give and take to, yes, this is part of the portfolio, it's part of my job, I need to do what I need to do, but also like, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like
Yep.
is this so
Yep.
much of a time suck that maybe it's not worth, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah, it was originally, when we got into the restaurant side, it was originally more about having something local that we could keep an eye on, that we didn't need to have our hands in every single day. And, you know, so we hired people to put them in place to handle a lot of that stuff. And, you know, I mean, it worked, it's worked for a little while, but the bigger we've gotten, the harder it's gotten to focus on, you know, day-to-day restaurant stuff. Like I just don't have the time anymore. So yeah, it would be a part of our portfolio that I will not miss if and when it's gone. So
yeah, I gotcha. That's fair.
yeah.
So how did you get into that exactly? I know this sounds nosy, but like if you were a Costco guy for a long time,
Mhm.
how do you go from like a 20-year Costco guy, you know what I'm saying, to kind of like I don't even know what you want to call it. I guess like what was the word you used for the group that you work with?
Like operations for the private equity group.
Equity, yeah,
Yeah.
equity group.
So
How did that happen?
so kind of funny path.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, being a Costco guy for 20 years, I'd kind of, when in 2015, I'd sort of reached the end of my my desire to be in corporate America anymore. Like I didn't want to be in corporate America anymore.
Yeah.
And at the time I was really, I built the sports nutrition category for Costco prior to me leaving. And then built their .com business for one of their major departments. And by that time, I felt like I had done almost everything there, and I was really into sports nutrition. Like I loved the category. And so I got an opportunity to take a career change with a company
Mhm.
that I had mad respect for, and I got to work in the industry, and it was super great. I loved it. Uh, Bounced around to another company after a few years. I just got a great opportunity there, which didn't end up working out. And that had more to do with some management decisions of the company.
Mhm.
Uh, and so at that point, uh, one of my longtime friends that I've worked with at Costco, Shannon, her husband,
Mhm.
who's my main business partner, he had this idea about starting this private equity group with friends and family, so that this us as a group could retire early.
Yeah.
And so really, like, I kind of fell into it just because I was not looking to go back into corporate America. I mean, I easily could
Yes.
have gone back to Costco if I wanted to.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me. Like, it's still not for me. And so got to talking about running operations for the group. And, I didn't know anything about running pizza places. I didn't know anything about running gyms. I didn't know anything about running multifamilies or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I'm a pretty smart guy. So,
Agreed.
you dive in and you take some lumps along the way, and you go, oh, crap, I didn't mean to make that mistake. But you just kind of learn. And I mean, I've had 5 years of an education on what to do and what not to do. And
Yeah.
it's been great. It's been really stressful at times. Like, I mean, really stressful at times.
Mhm.
uh and if anything, what I've learned through it is that being a small business owner and starting your own business takes a
Yes.
massive amount of perseverance, and sometimes willpower that you have no idea that you have. Um, and so it's just trying to figure out how to say yes to stuff and make things work, than crumbling and folding and throwing in the towel and saying it's not going to work for me. It's piecemealing stuff together and trying to figure out how to do it. And those can be really challenging and really sleepless nights.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the alternative is that that things go away. You lose stuff, you lose investment money, all that stuff goes away. So when your back's against a wall like that, you just say, hey, I don't have that's not an option for me, so we're gonna have to figure something out. And that's basically been what we've done for the last 5 years, to get us to a point now where we're in a pretty good position to make a big leap. And this would be a big leap forward for us on the Panama deal. And
Yeah.
yes, like we're super excited about it.
Yeah. As you should be. Yeah.
Yeah,
So last two questions. The
sure.
next question is, how would you compare, like, that's actually a hard question to word. So how would you compare your happiness as it pertains to your career from when you were a 9 to 5 guy at Costco as opposed to now, where you have because I can relate to that. Like a real estate
Yep.
agent, I'm basically always on call, right? So I don't have like I don't work 9 to 5, but I could work
Yeah.
9 to 5. I could work 9 to 9. You know, like doesn't nobody knows. So you're kind of along
Yeah.
for the ride, and you're just always on call to a point. Like, I have some boundaries. So I personally love that. But how would you compare that for yourself, going from a 9 to 5, which is what I did my whole life until now? I love it, but how would you compare that for yourself? Do you feel a lot happier? Do you feel more fulfilled? Do you feel like this fits you more? Or
Uh, yeah, it definitely. I mean, it definitely fits my personality more. I mean, I'm not somebody that sits around a lot. Like, I work a lot. I mean, a lot. And I mean, I'm coaching the women's team. I'm coaching middle school. I'm coaching high school. I've got the private equity group. I've got this consulting business. So there's a lot of hours that I spend working, and I don't mind it. I like the freedom of being able to do it whenever I
have
want.
time?
If I want to
Yeah.
shut down for 2 hours, I can.
Yep.
If I want to work until 10 o'clock at night, I can.
Right.
So I think from a flexibility perspective, it's great. For people that are go-getters. If you're not, then it's probably not for you. The downside to it is financial. You'll struggle. you could struggle. I mean, we've struggled financially for a few years, excuse me. And, and it's only now that, we've started to kind of turn that corner where things are starting to go the right way. And, it's pretty common for startup businesses or new, small business owners that, you're probably not going to make a dime for the first, 4 or 5 years. And that's, we had high hopes and aspirations, like, hey, we're really smart, we know how to do a lot of this stuff. Or what we don't know, like, we're pretty smart and can figure it out. But even then, you get kicked in the teeth. You get, I hate using this, the excuse, but it's true. But, you get COVID for 2 years. And what's the impact on your business, from that perspective, especially when you have international business, and then you've got restaurants, which were massively impacted, and gyms, which were massively impacted.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of financial stress. But if you, like I said, if you can persevere, if you have, the willpower to just keep pushing forward, to keep saying yes, to keep finding solutions to things, eventually, as we're starting to see, things start to flip the other way. And I think getting through that part will be incredibly satisfactory once we're there. I mean, we're almost at that point now. So hopefully in a couple months from now, if not less, we'll be in a way better position than what we are even right now. So yeah, I mean, it's good. I would highly recommend it for people that want to that have that drive. Go do it, man. Because yeah, you could lose everything, but it could be something so much more fruitful. I know, right? It sounds weird, but I mean, why not take the risk, especially if you're younger? You have the ability to recover from that much earlier in life than, I'm 47. So I'm reaching the point now where, taking those risks are much more difficult to do. But if I was 27, I mean, why not? What's the point? The roll of dice, take your shot, shoot your shot. If it works out, awesome. You've made a career out of it. And you get to do something you love in your own time. If it doesn't, you still have a lot of work time left to be able to recover financially from it.
So last question is, this is for work related, obviously. If somebody's listening to this and they're like, holy shit, that sounds amazing. Like some guy or girl are listening to this and they're like, I want to do that tomorrow. Like, that sounds amazing. I love like how he is flexible with his own hours, and he works in an equity group, and they prospect, and everything you just said. I would love to be a part of something like that. What would you say to that person about what the prerequisites are for realistically, tackling that endeavor?
Well, I mean, the great thing about our group is that we've got a really diverse group of work, like people with work backgrounds. Trying to find somebody that, especially if this isn't, your forte, trying to find somebody that knows tax planning, trying to find somebody that understands, the financial side, where, not just going to a bank and getting a loan. There's other outlets for that, that you can get, and not being afraid to explore those. Because there's a bunch of very wealthy people out there that would like to have alternate investment forms for their portfolio, their financial portfolio.
Right.
And you can get a relatively good interest rate from people that are like that, instead of going to banks. And so there's opportunities out there. So, exploring that as well. And you can surround yourself with people like this. It doesn't have to be you. You'll want to surround yourself with people that you can trust, that can manage the business, because you don't want to work in it. You want to work on it. Right. So, really, really making sure that you have people in place that can work in your business for you, so that it allows you to work on it and develop and get better, and more efficient at things that you're doing from a business perspective and a portfolio perspective. And then I would say last but not, then there's a whole host of things we could go into, but last but not least is really it really becomes an attitude. Like I'm going to get up every single day and I'm going to do this. I'm going to make something work that's been a problem for us, or I'm going to figure something out that is problematic for us.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to find a solution to this instead of letting it sit and fester.
Yeah. The
And
perseverance part.
unfortunately, yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that, they don't have that drive, or it scares them. And you have to be able to look that thing in the mirror and overcome it. So having the perseverance and having the wherewithal to be able to say, yes, I'm going to figure it out, that is an incredibly important element that I think we've had to deal with over the last 6 years. So
Gotcha. So when you're purchasing a business or a building or whatever it is, and you have to have people in place to run that, right? To work in the place.
mhm.
Are those people already predetermined? Or are you like doing, because I know a huge part of having a successful equity group is to not only buy properties that are going to be profitable, but also having the right people in place that have high integrity, that you don't have to worry about them stealing from you or doing other dumb shit. So like, was that already predetermined, or did you have to like as you got a new property, you had to start over and be like, okay, here we go again. Here's some
Yeah.
ads for hiring.
Yeah. I mean, that was a massive cause of headaches for early on, was trying to find the right people, especially once the pandemic hit.
Yeah,
You had all sorts of people that didn't want to work, or couldn't work,
yeah,
and so trying to find people that could, trying to find people that will work as hard as you work for your business is difficult. Thankfully we had a couple people early on that were with us that bought in, and in some properties it's taken a while, to get through and find that right person. The one thing I would say is, at least on my end on the operations side, the one thing that I think I failed at early on,
yeah,
I had to learn really quickly,
yeah,
is that just because you brought somebody in, don't be afraid to let them go quickly. One of the mantras about hiring people is slow to hire, fast to fire, or quick to fire. And I really think that that's true. Like, I think that the times that we've taken a longer process to find the right person for a specific role, the better that they've worked out. It hasn't always been the case, but the higher likelihood that it will work out. The times that we've been, short on time to hire people in, it's been disastrous. And so instead of I'm a big, like, trying to help people build and get better at things that they are. Like, that's just what I do. From a that's what we do as coaches. But I take the same mindset about it. But at some point in time, it's got to be up to that person to actually grab the job and go do it. And when they don't do that, we have to be willing to let them go quickly, because it's just not going to be something that they have a passion for. So
that reminds me of in the NFL. You know how like they'll have a regime and they drafted certain players. So
yeah,
then they're like male egos want to keep those players because they want those
yep,
players to work out because it makes them look
yep,
better
yeah,
instead of just like being like, listen, dude,
yeah,
the guy can't
yeah,
catch football. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
just cut our losses. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
um,
exactly. Yeah, it's very
it's
much like that. It's like, hey, go find your quarterback, and keep cycling through the quarterbacks until you find the right one. And then the quarterback, being a GM at the store, has got to find their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Like, who's their assistant manager or their shift people, and then the rest of the team. Fill them out with part players. And I've tried to bring that element to our side of the business so
yeah,
that people have kind of like an understanding. That's how I look at it.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, it's up to them too. They have to want it just as much as I do.
yeah. You
And
can't make them want it.
yeah, you got a business to run. You can't let the business fail just because somebody doesn't want to do their job. So
Yeah, that's fair. So I'm curious. It sounds like you're the type of person that you don't mind being really busy. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I'll have certain days where, and I mean, I'm making it sound more dramatic than what it is, but it feels like as soon as I wake up until whatever 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, I'm just going. I'm either going somewhere, making real estate phone calls, going to an appointment, going to my house, to do something for the rebuild. So I just all day, it's back to back to back, right? Like there's no rest, there's no nap, there's no. So I had those days. Thankfully,
yeah,
those aren't common for me. But when those happen, I'm like, man, I always think to myself, I'm kind of glad that isn't my normal day, right?
right, right.
But it sounds like that is your normal day.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I'm up at the gym. I get up at like 4:35. I get up and go to the gym in the morning now. And it kind of starts my day off. Can just kind of sets the tone for it. Very often I won't go to bed till midnight. And I'm just, I'll work most of the day.
Mhm.
There might be a few hours where I just take off and I'm just like, I need a mental break. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I spend a lot of hours working, and some of it's football too. I'm not like, I mean, I view that as work. I've still got jobs to do for the teams. And that takes up time. So it's not just the private equity group. But it certainly is. Yeah. I probably work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I may take a day off like every couple weeks and just recharge the batteries, and I will probably work half of that day just to try to get everything done. And I don't mind it. I like it. I like being busy.
Mm, gotcha. Fair enough. So on that note, we'll move on to football. I appreciate
All
you
right.
answering my curious questions. Um,
Yeah.
all that stuff is like super interesting to me. Hopefully the listeners agree. But since I'm in real estate, that's like I could talk to you for 2 hours about that stuff. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
I love learning like the nuances of different things, and probably the same way. Um,
I mean, there are benefits to it, man. I mean, like I've gotten to travel to places I never would have gone before. I've been to Panama numerous times. I've been to Costa Rica. I've been to Brazil, in numerous cities in Brazil. I've been to Belize. I've been to Roatan. All sorts of U.S. cities. In some of these places I never would have gone to before.
yeah,
So that
there's,
that part is there is a cool element to it.
yeah, there's some
Uh,
perks.
but yeah, but I mean, it's still work. Like we still work the when we're down there. It's not like hey, we're throwing
Vacation.
parties and beers and
Yeah,
you know it's we're still looking. We're looking at properties. We might go down to like one of our trips. We went down to Panama for about 5 days, and I think we saw somewhere between 42 and 47 properties.
wow.
So you're looking at 8 9 properties a day.
Yeah,
Uh, so
that's intense.
it's yeah, you work a lot. You're just in a nicer place.
Yeah, good surroundings. Fair enough. So
Anyway,
first,
on to football.
yeah, yeah. So with football, you mentioned that you coach at a middle school, a high school, and obviously the Majestics. So what are your
Mhm.
current roles on those teams?
So right now with the Majestics, assistant head coach and defensive coordinator, and then I'm also COO for the organization. For the middle school, that's our feeder program, our main feeder school into the high school that I coach at.
Yeah.
But I'm head coach at the middle school,
Okay.
and we'll run offense for there. And then I'm an offensive line coach for the high school.
Okay.
The high school I coach at is my alma mater. So it was kind of a plan to try to get back to my alma mater before I hung up my coach's whistle,
Yeah.
whenever that is. And so I wanted to make sure I got the ability to coach at my alma mater before that time came.
Gotcha. That's very cool, man. I can't
Yeah,
imagine coaching at my high school, but I don't plan on living in Ohio, really. Like I'm super content in Colorado, so that's part of it
yeah,
too.
yeah.
So one of my first questions I had for you for football is give us a virtual tour of your Seattle Majestics tenure, because, and I know it's a wordy question, but like, when I met you years ago, Seattle Majestics were a really solid team in the WFA, and then obviously they went to the WNFC. They might have been in the IWFL in between, but they went to
Twice,
WNFC.
twice.
Yeah, twice. So this team has their own like path that they've followed, but also you have been kind of all over the place as far as being the head guy, the head coach of the Seattle Majestics, and very much the face of the franchise. To, like you said last season, you were more of an admin role and you didn't even go on away games. So that's a pretty big difference, right? Of being the head coach or being a guy that doesn't go on away games. So give us a
Yeah.
virtual tour of your, um, the whole, like, from when you joined Seattle Majestics to right now. What does that look for you?
Yeah. So in 2009, I guess it would have been,
Yeah.
my ex-wife played for the team. Uh, and She came to me at work one day because we both worked at Costco, but she came to me at work one day and she said, "Hey, I think I want to play football." And I was like, "What?" kind of a random thing, but she was an athlete. She played soccer in high school,
Yeah.
in competitive, played competitively.
Yeah.
Um, and so she went to tryout, made it. She was a natural, really good athlete. Played running back. Um, not to get too much into the history, but tore her knee, and she started having conversations with the head coach at the time, Coach Talley, about me wanting to get into coaching. I'd always wanted to be into coaching football, and so in 2010, they had a coaching change for Coach Talley. Took a step down to watch his son go through his senior year of high school playing football, and so they brought in a head coach, Josh Bellinger, who brought me on. I didn't, when I first started, I thought I knew a lot of stuff about football. I found out I didn't know shit, uh, and that year was an utter disaster for us. I think we went 1-8 or 1-9, something like that season.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so they let Josh go, and brought Coach Talley back the next year. And Coach Talley called me up literally in the middle of the Super Bowl the following year. It was like third quarter in the Super Bowl. He calls me up and he says, "Hey, your wife at the time." He says, "Your wife told me you want to coach football," and I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, if you want to coach," he said, "you're going to have to come to my house every Sunday, spend 5 to 6 hours with me every day." He goes, "I'll teach you the game, and all the basics and all that stuff. I don't mean, what's holding and,
Yeah. Yeah.
penalties and all that. I mean the fundamentals to the game."
Right.
He said, I'll teach you that. And he said, "All I need you to do is show up at practice tomorrow night." And so I did. Showed up at practice the next night. Again, didn't know anything, but that began my education in football. And quite honestly, even though Coach Bellinger, who I adore, gave me kind of my first crack, Coach Talley is the one that really taught me the foundation of the game. And so everything I have, everything I started out learning, I owe to him. And so from that point, I was just an assistant coach. I worked with defensive backs and wide receivers at the time. The following year, Coach Talley started handing over the reins to defensive coordinator to me. So I was defensive coordinator by name, but he was still very integral on the defensive side until the next year after that. I became full defensive coordinator. He still called the offense, and it was around 2014, I think it was.
Yeah.
2000, I think it was 2014, that my wife at the time and I bought the team from the previous owners.
Mm.
And that's sort of when we began the transition from the old red and black team to the, more traditional Seattle colors. So, kind of redesigned our logo, switched our colors around, obviously, to the ones I'm wearing now. And we had Coach Tally stayed on with us for another year. And then he said, "Hey, it's your time now." And quite honestly, I didn't want to be head coach at the time. I really didn't. I reached out to, I think the number was 32 head coaches in the area.
Wow.
At high schools and and other programs that are around here. I emailed and called and left messages. I interviewed a couple people, and I just couldn't find either. Most of the people that I reached out to, they're like, "No, I have baseball or whatever, track or whatever that they did in the springtime for the high schools," and they just couldn't commit the amount of time that they needed to for the women's team. And so I think we were maybe 2 weeks before the season started. And I was just stressing about this. So I, talked to my wife at the time and said, "Hey, I think I should just take head coach job. I at least know the team. I know the teams that we're playing, and make that jump." At the time, we were in the IWFL, and so I think we were a year still in with the IWFL when we changed the colors over, but we eventually moved over to the WFA. And moved into that league. I stayed head coach, I think, for 5 seasons. And I had a great staff, man. Like it took me 3 or 4 years to build a staff, 3 years to build that staff there. But I had a great staff. I had a great defensive coordinator. I had great assistant coaches. Trusted them. Butsy was still assistant head coach with me this entire time. And in around 2018, I think it was, as is the case in women's football, some drama happens, and I decided it was time to take a step back. So I did. We elevated one of our assistant coaches to head coach at the time, Taylor Glassnap, rest his soul. The second year that he was head coach, the first year was COVID, first initial thing of COVID. So we didn't have anything. The second year, we started out, and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Like he came to practice one day and just looked not right. So he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which kind of threw all of us up in the air. Like he had to go take care of his health and his family, and
Of course.
so we kind of piecemealed stuff together. Through that season, it was not a great season for us. And at that point, I decided it was time. Yeah.
Was that 2021?
That was in 2019.
Oh.
What
What year didn't happen because of COVID?
I guess it would have been, maybe it was 2019 and then 2020. Because what are we in, 2023? Yeah, because it would have been 2021 and 2022 that we had. Yeah, so 2019 and 2020. So 2020 is when Taylor was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Okay.
And at the end of that season, I was really, I've been talking about this for a few years now, but I was really contemplating retiring. Yeah. I mean, I'd been with the organization 10 years. I'd been coaching with the organization for 10 years. And it was, I was like, hey, it's time for me to do something else. But the coaching staff, it's just like the Butsy's been in my ear this whole time. Like she just, it's her and I've been together coaching this team for so damn long that, it's kind of like Batman and Robin. And so anyway, so I said, okay, that's fine. I don't mind staying, but we need to find a new head coach. Which we did. So we brought a new head coach in, and it was 2021, 2022, and it just didn't work out, man. Like it just, I know he had a lot of fundamental stuff that I agreed with when we interviewed him. good personality guy. I love the background. I love his old school mentality. I really did. I mean, it reminded me a lot of Coach Talley. But it just didn't relay well on the field. And it wasn't for a lack of trying on his part. It just wasn't clicking. And when we got to the end of that season, Butsy and I had a conversation about keeping him on, and we had decided, yeah, absolutely, we're going to keep him. And as we got closer and closer to kind of tryouts, the tryout period of time, we were hearing rumblings that we were going to start losing a bunch of players. Yeah, just they didn't want to come back and play. Like, they didn't have a good experience the previous year. We had I think 3 losing seasons by that point, 3 back-to-back losing seasons by that point. And so Butsy and I had a conversation and just said, what are we going to do? Do we just fold up shop and call it good? Like we had our run, we tried it, or do we make a change, try to recommit to the program, which obviously we've done. And so we talked about, now with her and I, okay, well, what does that mean from a role perspective? On one hand, Butsy didn't like how things ended for me as head coach way back, and felt sort of that there should be kind of like that opportunity should come back to have some redemption there. The ego side of it was very much like, yeah, I want it, give it back to me. I want it. Yeah. But at the same time, I've always been about what's right for the organization. And despite my desires, and so I went home one night and I called Butsy the next day and I said, it's got to be you. It's you. It's the right time for you. I'll stay on. I'll be assistant head coach, whatever role you need me in, or whatever role you want me in. I help you get through the season as head coach. Whatever thing you need from me, whether it's working through how do I do this, how do I do that as a head coach, because she had never been a head coach before. But it was the right time. It was the right time to have a female come in and be a head coach for our team. It was the right time to get some of the players back into the fold that we had lost over the years. It was the right time for her too. It was time for her to spread her wings, and it's been a great move for us, man. It really has. It's been great. It's been great to watch her. Trying to, she knows like 90 to 95% of the stuff to do. It's just that like that last little polish of here, hey, let's have a conversation about this. How do we handle that? And it's not, it's not anything big. She knows what to do.
Small tweaks, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's been coaching for a long ass time. So it's I'm lucky that she's been a great partner to me while coaching, and I'm lucky to be a great partner to her as while she's as a head coach. Because it gives me a different perspective as well, and yeah, man. So it's now I'm back as a coordinator and assistant head coach and coaching O-line, and yeah, sorry about that. That was like a long dissertation about my history coaching women's football, but
I enjoyed it. So one of the reasons,
I guess when you've been coaching for 13 years in women's football, you kind of have a whole bunch of paths to cross, right?
dude, it's crazy to think that this is your 14th year. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah. It's a long time. I honestly, I didn't expect to be in it this long. And I really have contemplated retiring the last, 5 years. Mm-hmm. Some years have been much more serious than others. Yeah. I keep talking about this being my last year. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's just, the one thing about coaching women's football is, especially with me coaching year round, because I've literally been coaching year round football for well over 10 years now. I go from women's football into high school, and it takes a lot out of you. It really does. I'm actually surprised I made it this far, but I feel like I need to, like, I'm reaching the end. Like I need to do something else now. And I'll have high school to fall back on, or middle school to fall back on. But I'm getting there. I'm getting to the end of the line.
Yeah, it won't be too long. But we're on a TBD basis because
Yeah, yeah,
they keep on wanting you back, and you're attached to the team. You want the best for the team, and um, I don't blame you. I'd probably do the same thing in your shoes.
yeah.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Scott, besides just to catch up, is as you know, there's been a lot of buzz and announcements around Seattle because you've been able to corral a lot of, like you said, players that have left the Majestics in the past, whether it was last year or 2 years ago or even 5 years ago, um, and they've decided to come back this year. So, what do you attribute that to? Do you attribute it to the to Butsy being the head coach? Do you attribute it to the culture? Do you attribute it to getting rid of bad apples from last year? All the above? What would you say?
I mean, the first and foremost is it is a lot of it is Butsy. She has a lot of great relationships with these players. I think that not only does her personality have cause for players to gravitate towards her,
Yeah,
um, but I also think that the timing of the change from the last 3 years into sort of a return to the group that kind of carried the mantle from Coach Tally days. Having her and I and some of the other pieces come back into more prominent roles. Excuse me. I think that I definitely think that was part of it. I think having people like Rachel Woods come back and Jackie McCall come back.
yeah,
That they're very close friends with Butsy. And so having players like that return to the fold were a direct hand in Butsy being a part of that. But having Mackenzie Tolliver come back as well, some of it was the excitement around the numbers that we had in the off season. At tryouts, I mean, we anticipated having probably 45 or so, something like that. And by the time we got to signing day and team meeting stuff, like we were 65.
nice.
I mean, it was crazy. It's crazy. I mean, we're not at that number now.
Of
As
course not.
once you
Well,
know how
who
this
is?
goes. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Once you start hitting,
yeah, yeah.
people start to fall off. They're like
Right
they
on.
they figure out, hey, this is not for me.
Yeah,
But we're still in mid 50s range, which is stronger than we've been in a long time.
right.
So having those kinds of numbers, I mean, I think our rookie class this year is about 30-ish, somewhere in that range, which is
A little
about
bit over
double
that.
what we normally get.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think having a strong rookie class, we've got a lot of great athletes that turned out this year. And I know other teams have experienced. You guys obviously have had some great recruits coming in out in Denver. But I think having that has caused some of the veterans that maybe left under terms that were like, I'm not really done, but I can't be a part of it anymore. I think it
yeah.
gave them a breather, and now they've come back, and it's sort of like a breath of fresh air again. So yeah, man, it's been really, really exciting. I mean,
That's
really exciting for us.
that's very exciting, man. I love to hear that. Um, would you say that it feels like, sorry if this is a nosy question, but do
All
you
good.
feel like it feels, you know how like um coaches or players will be on some sports team and they'll say, "Hey, let's go back one more year, right? Let's go win a championship, or one last run, do it all together. It's like old times." You know what I'm saying? Does it feel more like that, or does it feel more like they needed a break for obvious reasons, and now that break's over, and they're ready to play for the at least near future, or
I
is it
think,
case by
yeah,
case?
yeah, I think some of that's TBD. It has a feel that some of the players that came back, like, hey, they'll give a year to Butsy.
Yeah,
A lot of them are older,
yeah,
but but the reason why it doesn't necessarily have that full feel is
Yeah.
because our rookie class is so large. So there's and they're very talented. So there's a substantial crop of rookies that are in this class that are bringing an element of excitement to it that I just don't know. This could be a 2-year run, it could be a 3-year run, it could all go up in flames after a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with the veterans, I think some of it depends on will their bodies hold up? Do they feel like going through it for multiple years?
Yeah.
That's always the
Yeah.
question. I mean, shit, man. Like players got to go through that stuff just as much as coaches do too. It's like, oh man, I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do this again. But some of them are very excited about playing again. Some of them are hey, they say I'll go as long as my body will take me. And if that's the case, then we'll have a return to prominence in this league. I think we're on a right path though, with the rookie class that we brought in this year. If that group stays for a few years and we continue to build on that, then we'll be really, really good. But it's gonna, I think it's TBD in all honesty.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah. That's awesome to hear, man. I truly, I'm a big fan of the sport.
Yep.
I especially because we're in the WNFC. So whenever I hear about a team having a resurgence like Seattle has had, that makes me happy. Like we have to play Seattle, right? So that can mean a loss for us, but it's not
Yep.
about that. It's not about, what's best for Denver. It's about what's best for the league.
Yep.
If the league's get literally the best in the US, we want to play the best competition. Hey
Mm-hmm.
man, you can't join the WNFC and then say, "Oh, what yeah, I'm happy to be here, but I don't want to play the best teams." Like I don't,
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, you don't get to pick and choose, do you want the smoke or not? And
Yeah.
so I love to hear that, man. Like one of my last questions I had for you is last season wasn't like that. And
Yep.
obviously that was the case. So
Yeah.
for Seattle last year, I mean, I hate to make you relive it, but like, the numbers weren't great, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had some tough losses, close losses to Oregon or whatever. And that team wasn't obviously isn't up to your standards, but that was part of like the 3-year losing thing, right? And like low numbers, not a lot of athletes, and some people not coming back at key positions. And I know like a couple years ago you told me that you had like in your first game, you lost your top two quarterbacks, and it's like, well, who the hell's ready to do a season with the third quarterback? So
Yep.
a little bit of that's bad luck with injuries. But how would you? I guess my question is, how did Seattle get to the point of being what they were last season? Because I know you have a lot of good things going on. Like you guys, I think you said publicly that you're wiping out player fees, which not many teams can even say that. But
Yep.
doing big stuff like that, and there's really nothing wrong with your culture. It turns out that head coach wasn't the right guy for the job, but on the outside, it didn't look like it was overly dysfunctional, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you attribute to the low numbers and the lack of, just it working out? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I would say this is gonna maybe hit a little too close to home with Denver this year, but I would say that I think we spent a lot of time focusing on trying to engage the international community a bit too much and not focus enough on our community here.
Yeah.
And I don't mean population, I mean the athletes that are here.
Yeah.
And because this year we specifically did not go after international players. Like we made an organizational decision. We've had an international player play for us since 2014 every year.
Right. Right.
So we made a conscious decision not to do that. And decided that we were going to focus our efforts locally. And I think that paid off. So I think that was some of the reason why our numbers were lower. But in all honesty, when you have a losing season and then you have a second losing season, to try to drum up a lot of excitement into that third season, you kind of have like that prove it year.
Yeah.
And all we proved was that we weren't that good still.
Mm.
And some of it is attention to detail. It I will say, personally speaking, I wasn't as involved on the coaching side last year as I should have been. And so, things got let to slide, and and now that I'm just speaking for me personally.
Yeah.
But now that I'm involved in things with much more detail, I'm very demanding, to sometimes to a point where players, they just don't like me, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But it takes what it takes to win,
Yeah.
and you can't let personality get in the way of saying, well, I want to win, but I don't like him, and so therefore I'm not going to do what he wants me to do because I don't like him. At the end of the day, it takes what it takes to win. And we've won in our past. Butsy and I have a really good, record from the coaching record together. And so I think we know the path, and and so that demand on the players,
Mhm.
as
That
much as
was,
they may not, as much as they may not like it, they
yeah.
will like it when the wins come.
Oh, for
Uh,
sure. Yeah.
you know, and I'm not, I'm not saying like I'm a complete dick to them or anything like that. Like, I'm not. There's no like abusive stuff like that. So it's like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
there's always crap like that in women's sports, man. Like in this sport, like it happens where people don't like being, they don't like being yelled at, or they don't like being coached hard, or they don't like, how they're not getting enough playing time or whatever. As is the case in every sport where there's coaching involved,
Yeah.
and so things get taken personally. But I really think that there was a thirst by the players that did come back from last year to want to be successful again, and so there's more of a buy-in this year with the demands that it takes to be successful, um, than what there was in previous seasons, and I think that, um, I don't know if it's society. I think some of that bleeds into it. You guys probably experienced that to some degree, as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
That people just aren't used to having somebody talk to them like that, and so consequently they shut down, or they don't want to be a part of it, or that kind of stuff happens, and you lose them. But I think that there was such a thirst for returning back to what we once were, that the demands that are being put on the players this year for, hey, we're not going to accept sloppiness here, we're not going to accept you running a drill like this, we're not going to, that's just not going to happen. You're going to execute the whatever fundamental drills the way that we want them done, not just half-ass them. Whereas that was sort of allowed to happen in previous years.
Uh,
So
see.
yeah, so I think we're seeing that growth starting to happen again, by the players, which is great.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, man. It's funny because Denver, we got our schedule, and then it got changed, because Alabama left, and we got our new schedule. I was looking at the schedule, and I was like, fuck, man. Like, we have no easy games. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, you in
Yeah.
WNFC, you're not really looking for easy games, but
Yep.
also it's kind of nice to like have a game where you're like, well, we should beat them. So like that shouldn't be a concern. You know what I'm saying? And so I was looking at our schedule, and I'm like, all right, we play Texas this year for the first time. We play
Yeah.
Houston, kind of a question mark because they're a first year team.
Yep.
Um, and we have Kansas City, who's a playoff team, Utah, who's Utah. Um, and then
New coach out there too.
right, right, new coach for the first time, and
Yep.
then obviously Seattle replaced Las Vegas. So
shout out to my guy Jasper, by the way.
Jasper Horn, yep, the man.
Love that
So
guy.
there's a lot of moving parts, and I was looking at the schedule. I'm like, man, I mean, if Seattle's no offense to you, but if Seattle's the way they were last year, then that's we should win that game, right?
Yep. Yep.
But the good news is they're not like they were last year. So now there is no easy games. We have to play playoff football every week, starting in
Yep.
week one. And the only thing that's unfortunate about our schedule now is our first game is not only against Houston, who's a new team, but it's in,
Yeah.
right?
Oh wow.
It's an away game, which is a far
Yep.
trip
Yep.
against a new team that has a whole bunch of crazy recruits.
Yep.
D Scott and all these big names.
Yep.
So you have like all this buzz around this new team, right? And there's a difference between having a whole bunch of athletes that look good on paper and then actually turning it into winning football. Me and you both know that. But
Yep.
recruit a lot of serious athletes. And so I'm not looking past anybody. The only thing that sucks for me because I have OCD is my role for the Bandits is to prepare us for our opponents. So
Yep.
I can do that starting with Seattle, right? Because I'll know who do you guys play in week one?
Oregon.
Oregon. That's what I thought. So
Yep.
I'll watch the film obviously of Seattle playing Oregon and see like all the who were produced and if there's any weaknesses, strengths, stuff like that. Do my thing, and then starting in week two, I can do what I do to feel like I at least contributed to being
Yep.
prepared. But for
Yep.
Houston, dude, it's a shit show because basically we could look at their head coach and say, well, we know she coached men in Virginia, and in Virginia she ran a 3-4. She'll probably run a 3-4 for Houston, or she ran a 4-3, whatever it is. So maybe that translates, maybe it doesn't. But
Yeah.
then more importantly, you have a list of all these athletes that they've publicly signed, right?
Yeah.
So you can say,
Yep.
okay, this girl plays running back and DB, this girl plays, linebacker, whatever. Like, so you're trying to piece it together, right? But
Yep.
if you haven't played them or if you haven't seen them see a preseason game, you're kind of just guessing. And you're thinking, okay, well, I'm pretty sure. Like, obviously, D. Scott's going to play running back. But Riss Tullis from Detroit, he was one of the best running backs in the WFA, but she also is a really good DB. So what did she play? Right? Uh, Nana.
Isn't it isn't it funny how I mean we have this, I would assume, based off of your guys' roster size is pretty similar, but isn't it funny how um women's football has started to evolve into two platoon where you have defensive players and you have offensive players.
Yeah,
And
separate thing.
the development of the sport is such that the as the roster size increases, you have that luxury now. Whereas for years, if you had 25 players, 32 players, you're lucky, and everybody's playing both sides of the ball. Like you didn't have that luxury. Now it's great to see, and I think the development of the WNFC and really pushing the gamut on there. Shout out to those guys. I mean, I know we're a part of that league, but I mean, those guys do a lot of hard work. And I mean, I think they've pretty much delivered on every promise to the teams. It says something about that, and I think it's great to see that women want to be a part of that league, to be a part of our league and play with the best.
Yeah.
But pretty cool to have that problem.
Oh, for sure, man. It's funny because you know me for a long time. So
Yeah,
when I coached the Mile High Blaze, I consider myself a pretty decent coach. I definitely won more games than lost games, and um, you know, our last season we made it all the way to the Western Championship against St. Louis. So I got used to working with starting with 24 players and then getting up to like high 30s. It's the highest I've
yeah,
ever.
yeah,
And we played pretty good football with those numbers. But I never had the luxury of going 11v11 in practice. I never
yeah,
had the luxury of just certain things that are they are the standard now with the Bandits. And
yeah.
so, like you said, man, it's one of those things like you don't know what you're missing because you never had it. But once you have it, you're like, oh my God, this is how it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like realistically, think about it. Like logically, how in the hell are you going to prepare for Rick Rasmussen in a triple option if you
Yep.
can't go 11v11 in practice?
Yep.
You don't even have a scout offense to run against the defense for them to look at it. So good luck. Good luck
Yeah.
going against a nuanced offense like that. Never going 11v11, never having a scout offense. I mean, the game, you already lost the game before it started. So now we have that luxury, thank God. One of the last things I was thinking about, and I don't take a slight to what you said about international players, but the makeup of our team is interesting because we do have international players and we do have
Yep.
out of state players and
Yep.
in-state players, and so that's very interesting. It's kind of like I don't not like it because I love all of our players, and I'm honored that they would go out of their way to play for us, if even if they're relocating from Australia or whatever the hell they're doing. But
Yep.
also, that's a dynamic of the team. If you don't have people there all the time, that some stuff gets lost in translation. There's a lot of accountability that has to be on a player that wants to know the playbook and not be there, right? It's
Right.
very easy
Right.
to not care enough and just get behind. And
Yeah.
so,
I mean, we have a couple players that commute from Oregon up to us
yeah,
to play. And I mean, so we do have out of state players, and there's scheduling challenges of that, as you know.
yeah,
And thankfully, the team has been really good about those players. They can't make every practice. Can you
it's
imagine
not
trying to drive
realistic.
2.5 hours from Oregon up to Seattle on a Wednesday night after
Right.
you've worked for 8 hours a day? It's not the most fun thing in the world to have to do. And
No,
so we understand from a scheduling perspective, and those players work their ass off. Um, but yeah, on the international side, it was an interesting dynamic. Like in some years it worked really well, and other years it was an unmitigated disaster.
yeah,
Um, but I'm not a fan of it. I think it's an important element of our sport
yeah,
that must remain, and we must continue to grow. And our teams must continue to be a part of, because there's some great coaches out there, but coming to the United States to play football, they're not going to come into contact with much better coaches than what are here in the United States.
yeah.
And
That's the
and
key.
it gives especially in the WNFC, and it gives them an element of the level of play that they don't get back home.
Yeah, literally.
Uh, and yeah, and so when they get here, a lot of times it's like, holy shit, this is what it's like. You know, like,
Yeah,
oh, I mean, wait, what?
yeah,
Uh, players are faster, players are bigger. It's more complex schemes. It's the intricate details of playing the sport are more involved. And so I think just the growth of the sport, especially on the women's side, is it needs that element of it.
yeah.
And so there's some great teams out there that have done a great job of bringing in international players this year. You guys are one of them. Mississippi did a great job. I'm sure I'm forgetting another one that's out there that while we're in the middle of a podcast, it's hard to think of all this. Sorry if I upset anybody.
No,
I'm gonna get a bunch
no,
of you're gonna get a bunch of hate mail about, hey, why didn't they mention this team? I'm like, okay,
yeah,
calm down.
no, they'll be okay. They'll be okay. But yeah, man, it's a great point. There's a player from Australia that joined us this year, and she was on. So the Denver Bandits do like Instagram,
Yeah,
like stories, right? Where like they'll interview international players or a player from
yeah,
Britain or whatever. It's kind of cool, like players interviewing players, and then you get to ask questions in the chat and stuff. So they did it for the Australian players, and I heard the girl say she's played football for 10 years. So I asked her at practice, I said, "Did you say you played football for 10 years?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "How much experience do you have 11v11?" And she's like, "Very little." So basically, she's played football for 10 years, but that's almost been exclusively 7v7 or 9v9,
yeah,
right? So when she played national ball, Australia versus whoever the fuck, that was 11s, but
yeah,
that's a very small sliver of her total football experience. So,
yeah,
like you said, she gets here, it is 11s, it's at the highest level that there is. And thankfully, the Australians that have come to us have been up to the task. They're like, we're here for a reason. We're serious about this. Let's figure
yeah,
it out. And so I'm
yeah.
I'm super stoked that they weren't overwhelmed. They just shut down, like mentally. So, but yeah, man, I'm excited. Season's going to be crazy. Now that I've interviewed you, I know that I can't, expect you guys to be what you were last year. So that's unfortunate for us, awesome for you. And so our whole schedule is brutal. Thanks a lot for that. And yeah, I mean,
I'm not just gonna be some cupcake. You were like,
no,
come
no,
I come
definitely
to
not.
Denver.
And I wouldn't expect you to
The
be.
team comes into Denver and we roll over.
Well, this is only going to go one of two ways, Scott. Either you were going to be the same team as last year, numbers wise, with maybe some veterans rejoining you,
Yep.
but better coaching, or was what you are is you have way better numbers. You look more like the old Majestics with better coaching. So that's all like best case scenario. And
Yeah.
so it makes our job harder, but I love it, man. I love competition. I love a challenge. I can't wait to scout Texas. I can't wait to scout Seattle. I mean, that'll be the first team I can scout. And so, just like you said, I love my job. I love what I do. Um, but that first game gives me anxiety because there's no way to scout them. I mean, it's a new team,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
like you just have to adjust. You know what I mean?
Well, it'll be
So
good. It'll be good to see you in Denver, man. Like it's been too damn long.
yeah,
I know. Last time you came out to Seattle, we had lunch and got to hang out and talk ball. And the one thing, like since Coach Ring and Suggett left
yeah,
and Rasmussen left, the sport. Unfortunately, a lot of times we miss that coaching camaraderie. Uh, everybody's got some sort of ego or whatever. They don't like the other team or whatever, but there was always like this coaching community with those older guys. And so we're missing that, but I'm thankful for the relationships I do still have.
yeah,
You being one of them, Jasper out in Utah being another one. I've got really good relationships with you guys. I'm excited I get to see you this year.
yeah,
And be out that way. And hopefully we're lucky enough we'll be in the playoffs and I can see Jasper out in Utah as well.
yeah. You play Utah during the regular season?
We don't. We were going to play them in the last game of the season in the original schedule, and then that got moved. So, ironically, we went from playing Utah to playing you guys. So,
Oh, okay. That's interesting trade also.
yeah, right. Well, they wanted to do the crossover, the league, the division crossover conference, whatever they call it,
Yeah.
crossover to, just to kind of have some parity there. So
Good deal.
it'll be an interesting season in the league, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, so
Yeah, brother. Anytime.
I feel honored that you squeaked out an hour for me. So
No, thanks for asking me.
I'll see you soon. We're
Yeah,
definitely having lunch on Sunday or whatever the plan is. And
yeah.
now that I know the Majestics are back, I mean, I like to say like good luck, but I don't wish you good luck. I wish you guys have a whole bunch of bad luck.
Don't be
Everything
a
bounces
dick.
our way. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see what happens, man. But
I
uh, besides week 2, man, I wish you guys the best. Seriously, I want you guys to have
appreciate
an
it, man.
awesome season. Go to the playoffs, and who knows? I mean, depending on how far you go, we're one of our biggest goals is to knock off Texas. And if we can't do it in the regular season, we want to do it in the playoffs when it matters. And if we're able to do that, who knows? I mean, it could be a Denver Seattle, championship if we're up to the task. So we'll see. But 1 week at a time.
Yeah, 1 week at a time.
All right.
Thank you for only 2 weeks away from kicking this thing off, man.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll talk to you soon. Good luck, and
All right, dude.
see you in Denver.